Do you think I'm smart, pretty, a good girl? Asked Olivia, a 4-year-old girl. Today we're going to look at, first of all, some interesting pieces of research on malleable intelligence. Then we're going to introduce Professor Dweck. Then we'll look at the two mindsets, and then we'll sum it up by looking at the implications for us as educators and caregivers. So John Flynn published a seminal work, looking at 7,431 participants. So his was a meta-analysis of previous studies, and what he found was that there was a growth of intelligence over years between 1932 and 1978, which equates to about 0.3% each year, therefore suggesting that if you did a test that was 10 years old, you would score higher on it today than you would have 10 years ago. In 2007, Philip Shaw did another interesting study with 307 children and adolescents and found that age-appropriate environmental enrichment can boost academic performance and to a lesser extent IQ. Then we turn to the Israeli Professor Feuerstein. His method looked at helping people with disabilities learn to use different parts of their brain to overcome impairments. So he was training them to use parts of their brain that weren't normally associated with certain tasks to complete those tasks quite successfully. A lot of research about the Feuerstein method and well worth looking at. Betsy Ong concluded that studying motivation, neurologically is quite difficult based on the neurological scanning methods that are available today, but the research does support Dweck's contentions. That she also reiterated Decky and Ryan's assertion or findings that intrinsic motivation is absolutely key in the learning process if you're going to get students motivated to learn or improve their learning. So what you believe about yourself determines your success as well as your approach to learning. So the first step in this process is for a teacher to examine their own beliefs. So do you believe, for example, that intelligence is fixed, or do you believe that it's a malleable process, that it changes through effort? Professor Dweck is currently a professor in psychology at the Department of Stanford University. She's taught for over 30 years, and she was previously at Harvard. Her area of interest mostly relates to intelligence and implications on motivation. She created Brainology, which focuses on teaching children how the brain works in order to develop a growth mindset. So her focus was very much on teaching students how to think and how to challenge themselves, how to overcome obstacles and hurdles. She taught them specific skills to grow smarter, or so she would say. Her best-selling novel bridges the gap between peer-reviewed research and teaching, in that it's quite easy to read and it uses everyday examples but is solidly grounded in incredible research. So we've got two different views on intelligence. We've got the entity theory and the incremental theory. So entity theory is related to a fixed mindset, suggesting that intelligence is a fixed entity and it dwells within us and we cannot change it. Those within the entity theory would suggest that you're born with a certain intelligence and that propels you towards a certain career path, and that is predestined, while a growth mindset person would say that intelligence is malleable, and that is that it's portrayed as something that can be increased through one's efforts. Dweck talks about that. A fixed mindset would see success or failure as a reflection of self-worth. So if you failed with a fixed mindset, that could affect your self-worth, your image of yourself, and you could be quite hard on yourself. But with a fixed mindset, when you're faced with difficulty or heightened stress, these individuals are often prone to anxiety, depression, and generally they can express that with anger, frustration. Blaming others for their own failures is very common. You might be able to identify these in your own behaviours, and certainly the more you immerse yourself in the mindset theory, you start to really notice different mindsets in yourself, can actively take steps to change those. A growth mindset would see success and failure separate from their self-worth, and they would see that everything is about effort and trying to achieve and reach your goals through sustained effort. So they see challenge as a learning opportunity or growth opportunity. A growth mindset person would take responsibility for their actions and apply consistent effort. So in goal setting, how does this play out? Fixed mindset people would focus on their level of intelligence, or they would focus on their natural abilities. I want to look smart, not dumb. They're very much focused on what their appearance looks like. So performance goals become a problem when proving ability becomes the only focus. It shifts the entire focus away from learning goals to one of sustaining the image that has been portrayed about the person. So a growth mindset person setting learning goals would focus on increasing competence, structured, guided inquiry that helps them get smarter. They don't feel like they're already good at something, they're working towards that level of understanding or mastery. So Dweck talks about many examples in her book, both in the business world and businesses that have succeeded and failed based on mindset, and how the businesses that use one strategy once but then later on they fail because they haven't changed, their business approach hasn't evolved. She also drew from sporting examples, and some of you may be aware of John McEnroe, who had very much a fixed mindset. He knew he was gifted, he knew he was a great tennis player, so he got very frustrated, very angry, which caused him to fits of aggression and anger on the tennis court. So he would tend to blame the court, the umpires, the crowd, anything else. It was never his fault. So that gives you a really good sort of a picture of what the results of a fixed mindset can be. Whereas it's been well documented now that Michael Jordan failed so often, and yet it was his failures that drove him to succeed. Kids who do well in school are likely to persist in the face of difficulty. Well, this myth has been well and truly debunked. So these kids are actually more likely to doubt their own abilities in the face of difficulty. Another myth is when you praise a child's intelligence, they become more confident and are able to achieve greater goals. Well, praise can often lead to risk-avoidant behaviour and fear of failure. So the kids don't want to be seen as failures, so they avoid the task. Another myth is where kids think who they are smart are less affected by failure. Well, children's confidence is often tied to their success, so fear of failure can be crippling. We see this evident with students with perfectionistic tendencies. Very important as parents and as teachers not to be mindful of those behaviours and not to model correct behaviours. Another myth is smart kids love to learn and seek out new challenges. Well, this may be the case for some smart kids. Most smart kids need scaffolded instruction just as any other child does. They need to be provided with appropriate challenge in the classroom that's set to their ability level and caters to their unique, atypical neural capacity. So a fixed mindset would believe that effort won't do much for you if your ability isn't high. What I was talking about before, that you're predetermined to be because you have a certain career because of your intelligence, whereas a growth mindset or within an incremental theory would suggest that with prolonged effort, mastery can be accomplished. So the focus is very much on the effort and reaching the goal as opposed to succeeding or failing in the goal. So success then is about the determined through the effort. So you succeed by continual effort. Dweck's view on confidence, what appears to be important is the confidence you bring to a situation, isn't the confidence you bring to a situation, but the ability to maintain a confident and non-defensive stance in the face of obstacles. This is much more difficult with a fixed mindset. So it is important, just to sum up this slide, it is important to praise a child's efforts and rather than themselves. So you don't say, well done, Julie, or well done, John. More so, you would say that the processes that you followed in this solving this problem are excellent. I like how you did X, Y, and Z to arrive at this solution. I loved your reasoning, for example. People with a growth mindset are um, more likely to rate themselves as significantly more positively and position themselves better to deal with obstacles. Some implications for parents. Well, parents today have come out of that movement where they were often smacked as children, so they're uncertain how to raise their child. What happens when your child loses in the relay race? What do I say to my child when he fails the exam for mathematics, for example? Implications for parents here would suggest that you need to focus on effort, strategies, and what they can do to improve. So instead of when a child comes second, for example, instead of blaming or coming up with excuses for the child, focus on things that they did well, but also ways they can improve. So they could have, for example, trained more. They started the race really, really well. However, they might need to do a little bit more running because you notice they slowed down towards the end. So the focus is on the strategies that they can employ to improve, to get a better result. The focus is shifted away from the failure, but more towards the effort that needs to be applied in order to achieve that success that the child so desperately seeks after. And it's the process that is involved in achieving that success, which is the foci. So implications for teachers, very similar in some ways to what they are for parents. First of all, though, teachers do need to investigate their own beliefs on intelligence, as I said before. In order to teach children well, you need to understand them better. Students can be taught how to think. So you can teach students how to think about and how to approach problems. Teachers should provide regular feedback on processes, strategies, and methods employed by the students to solve problems rather than praising the child. So when a child goes to write a story, you don't just write at the end, well done, Jimmy, good story. You actually provide constructive feedback on the elements that Jimmy did well on, how his grammar was, his punctuation was, and so on, and some things that Jimmy could do to improve his writing, rather than just saying, well done. John Hattie's work well and truly shows that feedback needs to be of a certain quality in order for it to be effective. Teachers should also be mindful of their own attitudes and habits, and they should be modelling good habits and good attitudes. So Dweck, we'll finish on this last quote from Dweck. I'm advocating teaching our students an alternative framework in which effort is expected and enjoyed and setbacks are informative and challenging.